Meowdy, 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 meowdy. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How is everyone? Hello, hello. Meowdy, meowdy. Welcome, welcome. Yes, it's time for reading Alice in Wonderland. Our first actual book that's not a manga or a short story. Our first full-length one. Ain't that something? Ain't that something? I hope the music volume isn't too loud, and I hope you will tell me if it is. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I think Medi got the very first victim. I think so, I think so. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is a special outfit I don't wear very frequently, but I think it is super adorable. But meowdy, meowdy. Let me see, hello. Meowdy, Maddie, meowdy, Grimiko. Meowdy, Golden Cream, meowdy, Seventh, meowdy, Kawaii, Kawaii. Meowdy, Samvalko, meowdy, Abassor. Meowdy, Bluntilda, meowdy, Misato. And meowdy to one and all. I hope all our volumes are good. I'm gonna try to keep things mellow, mellow, mellow. Under a nice, good mood. Lead out tea and snacks for you guys. And we're sitting in a nice garden. Don't you think it's a nice festive garden for reading? It's a good place for a lot of books, I think. I've done some recorded readings in the library, but I thought this is even better for Alice in Wonderland. Meowdyland. Yes, sitting legs crossed, crisscross, applesauce. Meowdy, Alexia. Meowdy. Yeah, we got some tea. And an ube tart. Yes, an ube tart for everyone to share. But since there's so many of you, you only have one bite. Only one bite, okay? I have a physical copy of Alice in Wonderland here with me. I have multiple editions of this book, but I won't be reading from my original copy since that one's very old, older than me, and it's falling apart. So I'll be reading from a newer edition that I got. It's nice, it's cute, it's sturdy, it's stable. I'll have no problem using it. And also, my bookmark that I'm using is from the Madoka Magica trading card game. It's a Homura. It's called Homura's Lonely Battle card, and it's gonna be my bookmark, okay? Gotta keep it classy with some Madoka Magica, okay, okay? Now, I don't know how many people have read the actual book for Alice in Wonderland. It is technically public domain. It's a public domain book. And it's been some time since I last read it, but it's a good book, and there's lots of fun renditions of Alice in Wonderland in media. So I just think it's all around like a pretty good time. Oh no, your internet's down. I'm sorry. That sucks. But get comfy, get comfy. It's a nice Sunday for reading together. Yes, yes. But, if everyone is comfortable and everyone has some snacks and some liquids, Meowdy Burn McChicken. Yeah. A little hobbit house. It's a little hobbit house. It's like this garden makes me think of The Hobbit. Makes me think of Alice in Wonderland. Makes me think of a little bit of Where the Wild Things Are, but more so the other two. But please, please, please get extra cozy, extra comfortable, and we're gonna read Alice in Wonderland. I don't know how far we will get today. It's like, it's not that. I have my microphone. Maybe somewhere. It's not like that long of a book, so maybe it'll take just a few sessions, but yeah. Negative is in charge of the ube tart to share with you guys. He's got that covered. It's no problem. Yes, we're just gonna have a relaxing time, and I'm gonna read to you, okay? Let's see. This specific edition says Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Other Stories. Different editions give it different titles. My past edition, I think, said Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. So I don't know how they make the distinction of titling these at all. I don't know why publishing houses do what they do. But I remember thinking that people who worked in like books and publishing were fancy people. Alright, and if everyone's comfy, I'll get to reading. Chapter 1 of Alice in Wonderland, Down the Rabbit Hole. Also, let me know if the music's too loud or too quiet. I want to have a comfy atmosphere with nothing too loud. Also, reading directly from my book is gonna be hard for chat, so I'll look up from time to time. Alright, Chapter 1, Down the Rabbit Hole. Alice was beginning to get very tired of sitting by her sister on the bank and having nothing to do. Once or twice she had peeped into the book her sister was reading, but it had no pictures or conversations in it. And what's the use of a book, thought Alice, without pictures or conversations? So she was considering in her own mind, as well as she could, for the hot day made her feel very sleepy and stupid, whether the pleasure of making a daisy chain would be worth the trouble of getting up and picking the daisies, when suddenly a white rabbit with pink eyes ran close by her. There was nothing so very remarkable in that, nor did Alice think so very much out of the way to hear the rabbit say to itself, oh dear, I shall be late." When she thought about it over afterwards, it occurred to her that she ought to have wondered at this, but at the time it seemed quite natural. But the rabbit actually took a watch out of his waistcoat pockets and looked at it and then hurried on. Alice started to see her feet for it flash across her mind, and she had never before seen a rabbit with either a waistcoat pocket or a watch to take out of it. And in the burning with curiosity, she ran across the field after it, and it was just in time to see it pop down a large rabbit hole under the hedge. Yeah, he's making her feel a little loopy. I wonder what kind of book her sister was reading, since it has no pictures or conversations. Could it have been a more so a history book? Yada yada. It just got started, pondering what Alice's sister could be reading underneath that tree. But Alice is not wrong. A book without conversations does seem awfully boring. Well, A book without pictures just means you need a better imagination. I think Alice has big enough imagination. In another moment, down went Alice after it, never once considering how in the world she would get out again. The rabbit hole went straight on like a tunnel for some way, and then dipped suddenly down, so suddenly that Alice had not a moment to think about stopping herself before she found herself falling down a very deep well. Either the well was very deep or she fell very slowly, for she had plenty of time as she went down to look around her and to wonder what was going on to happen next. First she tried to look down and made out what she thought was to come, but it was too dark to see anything. Then she looked at the sides of the well and noticed that they were filled with cupboards and bookshelves. Here and there she saw maps and pictures hung upon pegs. She took down a jar from one of the shelves as she passed, and it was labeled Orange Marmalade. But to her great disappointment, it was empty. She did not like to drop the jar for fear of killing somebody underneath, so managed to put it into one of the cupboards as she fell past it. Meowdy Gloomy, Meowdy Cliff, Meowdy Gleam. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We just got to the point where Alice is falling down the hole. Now, how much do you think this is Alice just falling asleep and feeling stupid like she said? And how much of it's real? The world may never know. Well, thought Alice to herself, after such a fall as this, I shall think nothing of tumbling downstairs. How brave they'll all think of me at home. Why, I wouldn't say anything about it, even if I fell from the top of the house, which is very likely true. Down, down, down. Would the fall never come to an end? I wonder how many miles I've fallen by this time, she said aloud. I must be getting somewhere near the center of the earth. Let me see, that would be 4,000 miles down, I think. For you see, Alice had learned several things of the sort in her lessons in the schoolroom, and though it was not a very good opportunity for showing off her knowledge, as there was no one to listen to her, still, it was good practice to sing it over. Yes, that is about right distance. But I wonder what the latitude or the longitude I've gotten to. Alice had no idea what latitude was, or longitude either, but the thought were very nice grand words to say. Presently, she began again. I wonder if I should fall right through the earth. How funny it will seem to come among the people that walk in their heads downward. The antipathies, I think. She was rather glad there was no one listening this time, as it didn't sound at all right of a word. But I shall have to ask them what the name of the country is, you know. Please, ma'am, is this New Zealand or Australia? And she tried to curtsy as she spoke, fancy curtsying as you're falling through the air. Do you think that you can manage it? And what an ignorant little girl she'll think of me for asking. No, it'll never do to ask. Perhaps I'll still see it written up somewhere. Yeah, sometimes you just gotta rehearse out loud to sound smart, to practice for future conversations or events to happen. But down, down, down. There was nothing else to do, so Alice began talking again. Dinah, I'll miss you very much tonight. I should think. Dinah was a cat. I hope they'll remember her saucer of milk at tea time. Dinah, my dear, I wish you were down here with me. There are no mice in the air, I'm afraid, but you might catch a bat. And that is very likely a mouse, you know. Do cats eat bats, I wonder? And here Alice began to get rather sleepy and went on saying to herself in a dreamy sort of way, do cats eat bats? Do cats eat bats? And sometimes, do bats eat cats? For you see, she couldn't answer either question. It didn't matter which way she put it. She felt that she was dozing off and had just begun to dream. That she was walking hand in hand with Dinah and was saying to her very earnestly, now, Dinah, tell me the truth. Did you ever eat a bat? When suddenly, thump thump, she came down upon a heap of sticks and dry leaves. The fall was over. Alice was not a bit hurt, and she jumped on her feet for a moment. She looked up, but it was all dark overhead. Before her was another long passage, and the white rabbit was still in sight. Hurrying down it, there was not a moment to be lost. Away went Alice like the wind, and just in time to hear it say as it turned the corner, oh my ears and whiskers, how late it's getting. She was close behind it when she turned the corner, but the rabbit was no longer to be seen. She found herself in a long, low hall, which was lit up by a row of lamps hanging from the roof. There were doors all around the hall, but they were all locked. And when Alice had been all the way down one side and up the other, trying every door, she walked sadly down the middle, wondering how she was ever to get out again. The concept of going down a hall and trying every door, going up, 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 and down, down, down to check every door really makes me think of like when I play survival horror video games and I'm very insistent on checking every door in a proper order, because that's the logical thing to do. Suddenly, she came upon a little three-legged table, and all of the solid glass. There was nothing on it except a tiny golden key, and Alice's first thought was that it might belong to one of the doors of the hall, but alas, either the locks were too large or the key was too small. But at any rate, it would not open any of them. However, on the second time around, she came upon a low curtain that she had not noticed before, and behind it was a little door about 15 inches high. She tried the little golden key in the lock, and to her great delight, it fit. Alice opened the door and found it led to a small passage, not much larger than a rat hole. She knelt down and looked along the passage into the loveliest garden you ever saw. How she longed to get out of the dark hall and wander among those beds of bright flowers and the cool fountains, but she could not even get her head through the doorway. And even if my head would go through, thought poor Alice, it'd be very little use without my shoulders. Oh, how I wish I could just shut up like a telescope. I think I could if I only knew how to begin. For you see, so many out-of-the-way things had happened lately that Alice had begun to think that very few things indeed were really impossible. There seemed to be no use in waiting by the little door, so she went back to the table, half hoping she might find another key on it, or at any rate, a book of rules for shutting people up like telescopes. This time she found a little bottle on it, which certainly was not there before, said Alice, and round the neck of the bottle was a paper label with the words, "Drink me," beautifully printed in large letters. It's all very well to say "drink me," but the wise little Alice was not going to do that in a hurry. "No, I'll look first," she said, "and see whether it's marked poison or not," for she had read several nice little stories about children who had gone burnt, eaten up by wild beasts and other unpleasant things. All because they would not remember the simple rules their friends had taught them, such as that a red hot poker will burn you if you hold it too long, and that if you cut your finger very deeply with a knife, it usually bleeds. And she had never forgotten that if you drink too much from a bottle marked poison, it's almost certain to disagree with you sooner or later. Meowdy, Scissorneck. Yes, she's a very smart girl indeed, always using her head. However, this bottle was not marked poison, so Alice ventured to taste it, and finding it very nice. It had in fact a sort of mixed flavor of cherry tart custard, pineapple, roast turkey, toffee, hot buttered toast, so she very soon finished it off. That doesn't sound very appealing to me, actually, all of those flavors mixed into one. Like, all of that sounds a bit messy. Grimiko, thank you so much for gifting out 5 subs. Thank you so much. Yeah, maybe if we did not have the flavor of roast turkey, it would taste much better. Hot butter toast is still an acceptable flavor, but turkey, no thank you. I'm also not a fan of cherry myself, but sometimes it can be okay. But a cherry liquid is much too much like medicine. Now let's see. What a curious feeling, said Alice. I must be shutting up like a telescope. And so it was indeed. She was now only 10 inches high, and her face brightened up at the thought that she was now the right size for going through that little door in the lovely garden. First, however, she waited for a few minutes to see if she was going to shrink any further. She felt a little nervous about this, for it might end, you know. Said Alice to herself, I'm going out altogether, like a candle. I wonder what I should do if I'm like that then. Then she tried to fancy what the flame of a candle is like after the candle is blown out, for she could not remember ever seeing such a thing. After a while, finding that nothing more happened, she decided on going to the garden at once, but alas for poor Alice, when she got to the door, she found that she had forgotten the little golden key. And when she went back to the table for it, she found that she could not possibly reach it. She could see it quite plainly through the glass, and she tried her best to climb up the edge of the length of the table, but it was too slippery. And when she had tired herself out trying, the poor little thing sat down and cried. Meowdy, Oregon. Thank you so much for coming by. We're reading Alice in Wonderland. Come, there's no use in crying like that, said Alice to herself, rather sharply. I'd advise you to leave off this minute. She generally gave herself good advice, though she seldom followed it. And sometimes she scolded herself so severely as to bring tears to her eyes. What a mood. And once remembered trying to box her own ears for having cheated herself in a game of croquet she was playing against herself. For this curious child was very fond of pretending to be 2 people. But it's no use now, thought poor Alice. To pretend to be 2 people. Why, there's hardly enough of me left to make 1 respectable person. Meowdy, psychic refugee. Soon her eye fell on the little glass box that was lying under the table. She opened it and found a very small cake on which the words said, "Eat me." The words "eat me" were beautifully marked in currants. Well, I'll eat it, said Alice. And if it makes me go larger, I can reach the key. And if it makes it grow smaller, I can creep under the door. So either way, I'll get to the garden. I don't care which happens. She ate a little bit and said anxiously to herself, Which way? Which way? Holding her hand at the top of her head to feel which way it was growing, she was quite surprised that she remained the same size. To be sure, this is what generally happens when one eats cake. But Alice had gotten so much in the way of expecting nothing but out of the way things to happen that seemed quite dull and stupid for life to go on in such a common way. So she set to work and very soon finished off the cake. That's the end of chapter 1. Let's have something to sip on before beginning chapter 2. What? DJ Khaled? What? So the first thing we learn about Alice is that she likes to sound smart to herself and practice for when she talks to others. I think that's quite silly. But she's very cute and a very relatable girl, so I think that's fine. And let's remember to breathe, because sometimes when you read so much you forget to breathe in properly, and then you might suffocate and die. And I don't want to suffocate and die, I want to read this book. So I'm gonna breathe. Very good. Now, it's very you. Chapter 2, The Pool of Tears. Okay. Curiouser and curious, cried Alice. She was so much surprised that for a moment she quite forgot how to speak good English. What a mood. Now I am opening up like the largest telescope that ever was. Goodbye, feet. For when she looked down at her feet, they seemed to be almost off out of sight. They were getting so far off. Oh, my poor little feet. I wonder who will put on your shoes and stockings for you now, dears. I'm sure I shan't be able. I shall be a great deal too far off to trouble myself about you. You must manage the best way you can. But I must be kind to them, thought Alice. Or perhaps they won't walk the way I want them to go. Let me see. I'll give them a new pair of boots every Christmas. And then she went on planning to herself how she could manage it. They must go by the carrier, she thought. And how funny it'll seem to be sending presents to one's own feet. How odd the direction will look. Alice's right foot, Esquire, hearthrug near the fender. With Alice's love. Oh dear, what nonsense am I talking? And just for a moment in her head struck against the roof of the hall. And in fact, just more than 9 feet high. And she at once took up a little golden key and hurried off to the garden door. Poor Alice, it was so much one could do, lying down on one side to look through the garden with one eye. But to get through was much more hopeless than ever. She sat down and began to cry. You ought to be ashamed of yourself, said Alice. A great girl like you, she might as well say this, to go on crying in this way. Stop this moment, I tell you. But she went on all the same, shedding gallons of tears until there was a large pool all around her, about 4 inches deep, reaching half down the hall. Aww. I froze for a moment. How strange that is. After a time, she heard a little pattering of feet in the distance. She hastily dried her eyes to see what was coming. It was the White Rabbit, returning splendidly dressed with a pair of white kid gloves in one hand and a large fan in the other. He came trotting along in a great hurry, muttering to himself as he came. Oh, the Duchess! Oh, won't she be savage if I keep her waiting? Alice felt so desperate that she was ready to ask if anyone. Oh, so when the rabbit came nearer, she began in a low, timid voice. If you please, sir, the rabbit started violently, dropped the white kid gloves in the fan, and scurried away in the darkness as hard as he could go. Ah, welcome, Tea Blue. Welcome. I hope you had a nice dream, and welcome to our nice little tea time book club that we're having. Welcome. Please make yourself comfortable. I hope you're doing well. Guess I might as well take a sip of water while I'm at it, or a sip of blood. Welcome. We have begun chapter 2. Alice took the fan and the gloves, and I saw it was very hot. She kept fanning herself all the time. She went on talking. Dear, how queer everything is today. Yesterday, things went on just as usual. I wonder if I've changed in the night. Let me think. Was I the same when I got up this morning? I almost think I can remember that feeling a little different. But if I'm not the same, the next question is, who in the world am I? Yowdy, Lara. Welcome. Yes, let us all have space. And Yowdy, Raspy. Welcome to Book Club. Make yourself comfortable. That's a great puzzle. And she began thinking over on all the children she knew that were the same age as herself, to see if she could have change for any of them. Really, County Moose. I'm sure I'm not Ada, she said. For her hair goes into such long ringlets, and mine doesn't go into ringlets at all. I'm sure I can't be Mabel, for I know all sorts of things, and she knows very little. Besides, she's she and I am I, and oh dear, how puzzling it all is. I'll try if I know all of the things I used to know. Let me see. 4 times 5 is 12, and 4 times 6 is 13, and 4 times 7 is, oh dear, I shall never get to 20 at this rate. However, the multiplication table doesn't signify. Let's try geography. London is the capital of Paris, and Paris the capital of Rome, and Rome... No, that's all wrong, I'm certain. It must have been changed for Mabel. I'll try and say, how doth the little... She crossed her hands in her lap, as if she were saying a lesson, and began to repeat it, but her voice sounded hoarse and strained, and the words did not come the same as they used to. How doth the little crocodile improve his shining tail, and pour the waters of the Nile on every golden scale? How cheerfully he seems to grin, how neatly spreads his claws, and welcome the little fishes in with gently smiling jaws. I'm sure those are not the right words, said poor Alice, and her eyes filled with tears again as she went on. I must be Mabel after all, and I shall have to go and live in that poky little house and have next to no toys to play with. And oh, ever so many lessons to learn. Now I've made up my mind about it. If I'm Mabel, I'll stay down here. There'll be no use of putting their heads down and saying, "Come up again, dear." I shall only look up at them and say, "Who am I then? Tell me first, and then if I'm liking that person, I'll come up." If not, I'll stay down here until I'm somebody else. But oh dear, cried Alice, with a sudden burst of tears. I do wish they would put their heads down. I'm so very tired of being all alone here. As soon as she said this, she looked down at her hands and was surprised to see that she had one of the rabbit's little white kid gloves while she was talking. How could I have done that, she thought. I must be growing small again. She got up and went to the table to measure herself by it and found that she had nearly, as she could guess, now had been 2 feet high and was going on shrinking rapidly. She soon found out that just because was the cause of this, and the fan she was holding, she dropped hastily, just in time to avoid shrinking away altogether. That was a narrow escape, said Alice, a good deal frightened in a sudden change, but very glad to find herself still in existence. And now for the little garden. And she ran with all the speed back to the door, but alas, the door was shut again. The little golden key was lying on the glass table as before. And things are worse than ever, thought the poor child. For I am never as small as this before, never. And I declare, this is bad that it is this. As she said these words, her foot slipped, and in another moment, splash, she was up to her chin in salt water. Her first idea was that she had somehow fallen into the sea, and in that case, I can go back by railway, she said to herself. Alice had been to the seaside once in her life, and had come to the general conclusion that wherever you go on the English coast, you'll find a number of bathing machines at sea and some children digging in the sand with wooden spades. Then a row of lodging houses behind them, the railway station. However, she soon made out that she was in a pool of tears which she had wept while she was 9 feet high. I wish I hadn't cried so much, said Alice as she swam about, trying to find her way out. I should be punished for it now, I suppose, by being drowned by my own tears, and that will be a queer thing to be for sure. However, everything is queer today. Yeah, everything is a little bit her fault, but remember, she's just a girl, and nothing is your fault when you're just a girl, you know? And that's all fine and dandy. Let's see. Why don't we take another little sip so that we don't dry our throats too much? Oh. Just then, she heard something splashing about the pool. A little way off, and she swam near it to make out what it was. At first, she thought it must be a walrus or a hippopotamus. But then she remembered how small she was now, and she soon made out that it was only a mouse that she had slipped in like herself. Meowdy, Mumbo Jumbo, meowdy. Welcome to our reading time. Would it be of any use now, thought Alice, to speak to this mouse? Everything is so out of the way down here that I should think it's very likely it can talk. At any rate, there is no harm in trying. So she began, "Oh, mouse, do you know the way out of this pool? I'm very tired of swimming around here, little mouse." Alice thought this must be the right way of speaking to a mouse. She had never done such a thing before. She remembered having seen a little, Brother's Latin grammar mouse. A mouse of a mouse of a mouse to a mouse of a mouse to a mouse. The mouse looked at her rather inquisitively and seemed to her wink with her little eyes, but said nothing. Perhaps it doesn't understand English, thought Alice. I dare say it's a French mouse. Come over with William the Conqueror. With all her knowledge of history, Alice had no clear notion of how long anything ago was, or when had happened. So she began again. Où est ma chatte? Which was the first sentence in her French lesson book. The mouse gave a sudden leap out of the water. It seemed to quiver all over with fright. Oh, I beg your pardon, cried Alice hastily. I'm afraid that she had hurt the poor animal's feelings. I quite forgot that you don't like cats. Not like cats, cried the mouse in a shrill, passionate voice. Would you like cats if you were me? Perhaps not, said Alice in a soothing tone. Don't be angry about it. And yet, I wish I could show you our cat, Dinah. I think you'd take a fancy to cats if you could only see her. She is quite a dear, quiet thing, Alice went on, half to herself as she swam lazily about the pool. And she sits purring so nicely by the fire, licking her paws and washing her face, and she is such a nice, soft thing to nurse. She is quiet and such a capital one for catching mice. Oh, I beg your pardon, cried Alice again, for this time the mouse was bristling all over, and she felt certain must be really offended. We won't talk of her anymore, if you'd rather not. We indeed, cried the mouse, who was trembling down to the end of its tail, as if I would talk on such a subject. Our family has always hated cats. Nasty, low, vulgar things. Don't let me hear the name again. I won't indeed, said Alice in a great hurry to change the subject of conversation. Are you fond of the, dogs? The mouse did not answer, so Alice went on eagerly. There's such a nice little dog near our house I should like to show you. A bright-eyed terrier, you know, with a curly brown hair. It'll fetch things when you throw them. And it'll sit up on one leg and beg for its dinner and all sorts of things. I can't remember half of them. It belongs to a farmer, you know. And he says it's so useful. It's worth £100. He said it'll kill all the rats and, oh dear, cried Alice, sorrowful tone. I'm afraid I've offended again. For the mouse was swimming away as hard as it could go, making quite a commotion in the pool as it went. So she called softly after it, Mouse dear, do come back again, and we won't talk about cats or dogs either if you don't like them. And the mouse heard this, it turned around and swam slowly back to her. Its face was quite pale, with passion, Alice thought. And it said with a low, trembling voice, let us get to the shore, and then I will tell you my history, and you'll understand why I hate cats and dogs. It was high time to go, for the pool was getting quite crowded, and the birds and animals that had fallen into it. There was a duck, and a dodo, and a lory, and an eaglet, and some other curious creatures. Alice led the way, and the whole party swam to shore. And that's the end of chapter 2. I'll have some more blood to soothe the throat. It was quite funny for her to assume this mouse was French, but there's a part of me that Alice knew that a mouse would not want to hear the cat or a dog catching its relatives in such a way. Kind of makes me feel like Alice is playfully cruel, don't you think? Not really minding nobody's feelings. Now they'll breathe again. She's just a girl. Now breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. I can be quite the mouth breather myself. I always have such a congested nose. Breathe in and out. Gotta force some oxygen into your brain, or you won't know what will happen. Now one more time. Now I can breathe again. And let's see, we're on to chapter 3. A caucus race and a long tail. Also, I have an itch. Give me a moment. Meowdy, witches. Meowdy, meowdy, meowdy. We have arrived at Chapter 3 of Alice in Wonderland, a caucasus and a long tail. There were indeed a queer-looking party that assembled on the bank. The birds were jaggled feathers, and the animals with the fur clinging close to them, dripping wet, cross, and uncomfortable. The first question, of course, is how to get dry again. They had a consultation about this, and after a few minutes it seemed quite natural to Alice to find herself talking familiarly with them, as if she had known them her whole life. Indeed, she had quite a long argument with the Lorry, who at last turned sulky and would only say, "I'm older than you, and I know I must know better, yes, yes." And this to Alice would not allow this without knowing how old it was. And the Lorry positively refused to tell its age. There was no more to be said. At last the mouse, who seemed to be the person of some authority among them, called out, "Sit down, all of you, and listen to me. I'll soon make you dry enough." They all sat down at once in a large ring, with the mouse in the middle. Alice kept her eyes anxiously fixed on it, for she felt as if she was sure to catch a bad cold if she did not dry soon. "Meowdy, mostly harmless." "Ahem," said the mouse with an importance in the air. "Are you all quite ready? This is the driest thing I know. Silence all around, if you please." William the Conqueror, whose cause was favored by the Pope, was submitted to me by the English, who wanted leaders and had been of late much accustomed to the usurpation of conquest. Edwin and Morcar, the Earls of Mercia and Northumbria, said the Lorry with such a shiver. This next page in the book is just pictures. And in this picture of this part of the book, I see dodos and ducks and geese and parrots and gophers and crabs and a mouse and some creature I can't distinguish what it is, and I even see an owl and a pelican. And is that a monkey? You would know if you could see it, but unfortunately you're too small and can't see my book. "I beg your pardon," said the mouse, frowning but very politely. "Did you speak?" "Not I," said the Lorry hastily. "I thought you did," said the mouse. "I proceed. Edwin and Morcar, the Earls of Mercia and Northumbria, declared for him. Evans the Grand, the patriotic Archbishop of Canterbury, found it advisable." "Found what?" said the duck. "Found it," said the mouse, replied rather crossly. "Of course you know what it means." "I know what it means well enough when I find a thing," said the duck. "It's generally a frog or a worm. The question is, what did the Archbishop find?" The mouse did not notice this question, but hurriedly went on. "Found it advisable to go with Edgar Atheling to meet William and offer him the crown." "William's, whoa, thank you so much for the follow, Rajon Hammond. I hope you're enjoying Alice in Wonderland." William's conduct at first was moderate, but the insolence of his Normans... "How are you getting on now, my dear?" it continued, turning it to Alice as it spoke. "Yeah. For some reason this mouse is quite, a history major himself, huh? It's silly." "As what does ever," said Alice in a melancholy tone. "It doesn't seem to dry me at all." "In that case," said the dodo, solemnly, rising to his feet, "I move that the meeting adjourn for an immediate adoption of a more energetic remedy." "Speak English," said the eaglet. "I don't know the meaning of half of those long words." And what's more, I don't believe you do either. And the eaglet bent down on its head, and to hide a smile, some of the other birds tittered audibly. What I was going to say, said the dodo in an offended tone, was that the best thing we could do to get us dry is a caucus race. What is a caucus race? Said Alice. Not much that she wanted to know, but the dodo had paused as if it was thought somebody ought to speak, and no one else seemed inclined to say anything. Why, said the dodo, the best way to explain it is to do it. And as you might like to try the thing yourself, some winter day I'll tell you the dodo managed it. First it marked out the race course in a sort of a circle. The exact shape doesn't matter, it said. And then all the party were placed along the course here and there. There was no 1, 2, 3 and away. But they began running when they liked, and left off when they liked, so that it was not easy to know when the race was over. However, when they had been running half an hour or so, they were quite dry again. And the dodo suddenly called out, "The race is over." And they all crowded around it, panting and asking, "But who has won?" This question the dodo could not answer without a great deal of thought. It sat for a long time with one finger pressed upon its forehead, in which you usually see a Shakespeare in the pictures. Everybody has one, and almost all have prizes. But who is to get the prizes? Quite the chorus of voices asked. Why, she, of course, said the dodo, pointing to Alice with one finger. And the whole party at once crowded round her, calling out in a confused way, "Prizes, prizes!" Alice had no idea what to do, and in despair she put her hand in her pocket and pulled out a box of comfits. Luckily, the salt water had not gone into it, and handed out them a round of prizes. It was exactly 1 piece all around. "But she must have a prize herself, you know," said the mouse. "Of course," said the dodo, replied in a very grave tone. "What else have you got in your pocket?" he went on, turning to Alice. "Only a thimble," said Alice sadly. "Hand it over," said the dodo. And they crowded around her once more while the dodo solemnly presented the thimble, saying, "We beg your acceptance of this elegant thimble." And when they had finished a short speech, they all cheered. Alice thought the whole thing very absurd, but it all looked so grave that she did not dare to laugh. And as she could not think of anything to say, she simply bowed and took the thimble, looking solemnly as she could. The next thing was to eat the comfits. This caused some noise and some confusion, as the birds complained that they could not taste theirs, and the small ones had choked on it and patted on their backs. However, it was over at last, and they sat down again in a ring and begged the mouse to tell them something more. "You promised to tell me your history, you know," said Alice. "And why you hate C&D?" she added in a whisper, half afraid that she'd be offending them again. "Mine is a long and sad tale," said the mouse, turning to Alice and sighing. "It is a long tale, certainly," said Alice, looking down in wonder at the mouse's tail. "But why do you call it sad?" "But, meowdy, please." She kept puzzling about it while the mouse was speaking, so that her idea of the tale being something like this. Fury said to the mouse that he met in the house. "Let us both go to the law. I'll prosecute you. Come, I'll take no denial. We must have the trial, for really this morning I had nothing to do," said the mouse to the courier. "Such a trial, dealer sir, with no jury or judge, would be wasting our breath. I'll be judge, I'll be jury," said the cunning old fury. "I'll try the whole cause, and the condemn to you to death." Sorry, that part's hard to read because it's actually in the shape of a mouse's tail. That's the funny thing about reading Alice in Wonderland. Some things are written purposely obtuse to make it shaped as something or hard to read, which is pretty unique to this book. But I do see the Phantom Tollbooth has some stuff similar, and would be the boys' version of this. "You're not attending," said the mouse to Alice. "What are you thinking of?" "I beg your pardon," said Alice very humbly. "You've got a fifth bend, I think." "I had not," cried the mouse sharply and very angrily. "And not," said Alice, ready to make herself useful and looking anxiously about her. "Oh, do let me help undo it." "I shall do nothing of the sort," said the mouse, getting up and walking away. "You insult me about talking of such nonsense." "I didn't mean it," pleaded poor Alice. "We are so easily offended, you know." The mouse only growled in reply. "Please come back and finish your story," Alice called after it, and all others joined in chorus. "Yes, please do." But the mouse only shook his head impatiently and walked a little quicker. "What a pity I couldn't stay," sighed the lorry as soon as it was quite out of sight. And an old crab took the opportunity of saying to her daughter, "Ah, my dear, let this be a lesson to you to never lose your temper." "Hold your tongue, Moss," the young crab, a little snappishly. "You're enough to dry a patience of an oyster." "I wish I had my dye here." "I know I do." And alas, Alice said aloud, addressing nobody in particular, "she'd soon fetch it back." "And who is Dinah, if I might venture to ask the question?" said the lorry. Alice replied eagerly, for she was always ready to talk about her pet. "Dinah's our cat, and she's such a capital one for catching mice you can't think. Oh, and though I wish I could see her after birds, well, she'll eat a little bird as soon as I look at it." A speech caused a remarkable sensation amongst the party. Some of the birds hurried off at once. One old magpie began wrapping itself very carefully, remarking, "I really must be getting home. The night air doesn't suit my throat." And the canary called out in a trembling voice to its children, "Come away, my dear. It's high time you were all in bed." On various pretexts, they all moved off, and Alice was soon left alone. "Oh, I wish I hadn't mentioned Dinah. I wonder if I shall ever see you anymore." And here poor Alice began to cry again, for she felt very lonely and low-spirited. In a little while, however, she began heard a little pattering of footsteps in the distance, and she looked up eagerly, half hoping that the mouse had changed its mind and was coming back to finish the story. And that's the end of chapter 3. As I was saying, there's lots of moments in Alice in Wonderland where things are written in an absurd way, in different shapes and even backwards at times, to make it quite difficult to read, but that's part of the fun of it. And Alice continues to talk about things that are very distasteful to creatures that may be eaten by cats. It reminds me of what I told you guys earlier, when I told you of the lizard who chased me down and jumped at me to bite my ankle earlier, and my cat Shy Guy caught it and saved me. Yeah, it is fun. Now let us have some more drinkies. Oh. And we can take a moment to breathe again. Yeah, Shy Guy is much of a protector. He also is much of a cuddler, too. Howdy, Mumbo Jumbo. I must breathe. It's very nice, breathe. Yeah, I have many good cats. Such as Alice, I can't get enough of talking about my cats. Yes, more hydration is needed. Oh, you found a stray? What kind of cat was it? I found a stray kitten the other day too, but I was not fast enough to catch him. He looked quite cute and could not be more than 4 to 6 months old. You know? Aw, one with a few brown spots. The one I saw had a white tummy and gray stripes and was quite skinny. Ah, yes, my cat Kino, the foot fetishist. Kino's getting really chubby these days, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. He's becoming a chubby old man cat. He's 8 years old. Now, we're about to begin Chapter 4 of Alice in Wonderland. Chapter 4, the rabbit sends in a little bill. Breathing. Now, Chapter 4, the rabbit sends in a little bill. It was the white rabbit trotting slowly back again and looking anxiously about as it went, as if it had lost something, and she heard it muttering to itself. The Duchess, oh my dear paws, oh my fur and whiskers. She'll get me executed for sure as ferrets are ferrets. Where can I have dropped them, I wonder? Alice guessed in a moment that I was looking for the fan and pair of white kid gloves, but she was very good-naturedly began hunting for them, but they were nowhere to be seen. Everything seemed to have changed since her last swim in the pool and in the great hall, with a glass table and little door that had vanished completely. Very soon the rabbit noticed Alice as she went hunting about and called out to her in an angry tone. "Why, Marianne, what are you doing out here? Run home this moment and fetch me a pair of gloves and a fan. Quick now." And as Alice was so much frightened that she ran off at once in the direction that it pointed to, without even trying to explain the mistake that it had made. "He took me for his housemaid," she said to herself as she ran. "How surprised he'll be when he finds out who I am. But I'd better take him his fan and gloves, that is if I can find them." As she said this, she came upon a neat little house, and on the door of which she was so brave brass plate with the name W. Rabbit engraved upon it. She went in without knocking and hurried up the stairs in great fear lest she should meet the real Marianne and be turned out of the house before she had the fan and gloves. "How queer it seems," Alice said to herself, "to be going messages for a rabbit. I suppose Dinah will be sending me messages next." She began fancying all sorts of things that would happen. Otsukiri, thank you so much for the follow. I hope you're ready to listen to the tale of Alice as she grabs these kid gloves and fan for the white rabbit. And she began fancying all sorts of things that could happen. "Miss Alice, come here directly and get ready for a walk." "Coming this minute, nurse, but I've got to watch this mouse hole till Dinah comes back and see what the mouse doesn't get out. Only, I don't think," Alice went on, "that it'll let Dinah stop in the house if it began ordering people around like that." By this time, she had found her way to the tiny little room with a table in the window, and on it, as she had hoped, a fan and 2 or 3 pairs of tiny white kid gloves. She took up the fan and a pair of gloves and was just going to leave the room when her eye fell upon a little bottle that stood near the looking-glass. There was no label this time with the words "Drink me," but nonetheless she uncorked it and put it to her lips. I know something interesting is sure to happen, she said to herself, whenever I eat or drink anything. So I'll just see what this bottle does, and I do hope it'll make me grow large again, for really I'm quite tired of being such a tiny little thing. It did indeed, so much sooner than she had expected. Before she had drunk half the bottle, she found her head passing through the ceiling, and she had to stoop to save her neck from being broken. She hastily put down the bottle, saying to herself, "That is quite enough. I hope I shan't grow any more as is. I can't even get out the door. I do wish I hadn't drunk quite so much." At last, it was all too late to wish that. She went on growing and growing, and very soon she had to kneel down on the floor. With another minute there was not even room for this. She tried the effect of lying down with one elbow against the door and the other arm curled around her head. Still, she went on growing, and at the last resource, she put one arm out of a window and the other foot down the chimney, and to herself she said, "Oh, I can do no more. Whatever happens will happens. What will become of me?" Luckily for Alice, the little magic bottle now had its full effect, and she grew no larger. Still, it was very uncomfortable, and there as it seemed to be no sort of chance of her ever getting out of the room again. No wonder she felt unhappy. This time Alice wasn't so smart. She said to always look for a label, as something was certain to happen. Oh well. It was much pleasanter than home, thought poor Alice, when one wasn't always growing larger and smaller and being ordered around by mice and rabbits. I almost wish I hadn't gone down the rabbit hole, and yet, it's rather curious, you know, this sort of life. I do wonder what can happen have happened, you know? When I used to be reading fairy tales, I fancied that kind of thing never happened. Now here I am in the middle of one. There ought to be a book written about me. That there oughta. And when I grow up, I'll write one. But I'm grown now, she added in a sorrowful tone. At least there was no room for me to grow anymore. Meowdy, Votrex. Meowdy. I hope you're having a nice day and that you had a great time listening to all that nice music. Love, love. Oh, you foolish Alice. But then, thought Alice, I shall never get older than I am now. That'll be a comfort one way. I'd never be an old woman. I'd always have no lessons to learn. Oh, I shouldn't like that. Oh, you foolish Alice, she answered herself. How can you learn lessons here? Why, there's hardly any room for you, and no room at all for any book lessons. Yes, I shall see you in the VOD, indeed. And so she went on, taking first one side and then the other, making a quiet conversation of it all together. But after a few minutes, she heard a voice outside, so she stopped and listened. "Marianne, Marianne," said the voice, "fetch me my gloves this moment." Then came the little pattering of feet on the stairs. Alice knew it was the rabbit coming to look for her. She trembled until she shook the house, quite forgetting that she was now 1,000 times larger than the rabbit. Had no reason to be afraid of it. Presently, the rabbit had come to the door and tried to open it, but as the door opened inwards and Alice's elbow was pressed hard against it, the attempt proved to be a failure. Alice heard it say to itself, "I'll go around to get at the window." That you won't, thought Alice, and after waiting until she fancied she heard the rabbit just under the window, she suddenly spread her hand and made such a snatch in the air. She did not get a hold of anything, but she heard a little shriek and a fall and a crash and a broken glass. from which she concluded that it was just possible that it had fallen into a cucumber frame or something of the sort. Next came an angry voice, the rabbit's. "Pat, Pat, where are you?" And then a voice she had never heard before. "Sure, then I'm here, digging for apples, Your Honor." "Digging for apples indeed," said the rabbit angrily. "Here, come help me out of this." Sounds of more broken glass. "Now tell me, Pat, what's that in the window?" "Sure, it's an arm, Your Honor." He pronounced her arm. "An arm, you goose. Who ever saw one this size? Why, it fills the whole window." "Sure does, Your Honor. But that's an arm for all of that. It's got no business there. At any rate, go and take it away." There was a long silence after this, and Alice could only hear whispers now. And then, such as, "Sure, I don't like it, Your Honor, at all, at all." "Do as I tell you, coward." And at last she spread out her hand again and made another snatch in there. This time there was 2 little shrieks. And more sounds of broken glass. What a number of cucumber frames there must be, thought Alice. I wonder what they'll do next. As for pulling me out of the window, I only wish they could. I'm sure they don't want to stay here any longer. She waited for some time without hearing anything more. At last came a rumbling of little cart wheels and the sound of a good many voices all talking together. She made out the words. "Where's the other ladder? Why didn't I bring this one?" "Bill's got the other." "Bill, fetch it here, lad. Here, put it in this corner. No, tie 'em together. First, they don't reach half the height yet. Ugh, they'll do well enough. Don't be particular. Here, Bill. Catch a hold of this rope. Well, this roof bear. Mind the loosely. Ugh, it's coming down. Heads below." A loud crash. "Now, who did that?" "It was Bill, I fancy." "Who's gonna go down that chimney?" "Nah, I shan't. You do it." "That won't do. Bill's gotta go down. Here, Bill. The master says you gotta go down the chimney." "Oh, so Bill's got to come down the chimney, has he?" said Alice to herself. "Why, they seem to put everything upon Bill. I wouldn't be Bill in Bill's place for a good deal. This fireplace is narrow, to be sure, and I think I can kick a little." She drew her foot as far down the chimney as she could and waited until she heard a little animal, she couldn't guess what sort it was, scratching and scrambling down the chimney, close above her, and then saying to herself, "This is Bill." She gave one sharp kick and waited to see what would happen next. The first thing she heard in general chorus of "There goes Bill!" Then the rabbit voice alone, catching you by the hedge. And silence, and then another confusion of voices. "Hold up his head, Brandy. Now don't choke him." "How was it, old fellow? What happened to you? Tell us all about it." Last came from a feeble squeaking voice. "That's Bill," thought Alice. "Well, I hardly know. No more thankee. I'm better now. I'm a deal too flustered to tell you. All I know is something comes at me like that, jack-in-a-box, and I go up like a skyrocket." "So you did, old fellow," said the others. "Let's burn the house down," said the rabbit's voice. Alice called out as loud as she could. "If you do, I'll set Dinah on you." There was a dead silence instantly, and Alice thought to herself, "I wonder what they'll do next." If they had any sense, they'd take the roof off. After a minute or two, they began moving about again. Alice heard the rabbit say, "A barrelful will do to begin with." "A barrelful of what?" thought Alice. She had not long to doubt, for the next moment a shower of little pebbles came rattling in the window, and some of them hit her in the face. "I'll put a stop to this," she said to herself, and shouted, "You better not do that again," which produced another dead silence. Alice noticed with some surprise that the pebbles were all turning into little cakes as they lay on the floor. The bright idea came to her head. If I eat one of these cakes, she thought, I'm sure to make some change in my size. And as it can't possibly make me larger, it must make me smaller, I suppose. Yeah, bullied by little rocks that turned into little cakes. I wish all little rocks would turn into little cakes. Petite four. I love petit fours. So she swallowed one of the cakes and was some delight to find that she began shrinking directly. As soon as she was small enough to get through the door, she ran out of the house and found quite the crowd of animals and birds waiting outside. The poor little lizard, Bill, was in the middle, being held up by 2 guinea pigs who were giving something out of a bottle. They all made a rush at Alice the moment she appeared, but she ran off as hard as she could and soon found herself safe in the thick of the woods. The first thing I've got to do, said Alice to herself as she wandered about the wood, is to grow the right size again, and the second thing is to find my way to the lovely garden. I think that will be the best plan. Sounded like an excellent plan, no doubt. She did it very neatly and simply arranged. The only difficulty is that she had not the smallest idea of how to set about it. And while she was peering anxiously amongst the trees, a little sharp bark overhead made her look up in a great hurry. An enormous puppy was looking at her with large round eyes and Finley stretched out one paw trying to touch her. Poor little thing, said Alice in a coaxing tone as she tried to whistle to it. But she was terribly frightened all the time and thought that it might be hungry, in which case it would be very likely to eat her up in spite of all her coaxing. Hardly knowing what she did, she picked up a little stick and held it to the puppy, whereupon the puppy jumped in the air off all of its feet at once in a yelp of delight and rushed at the stick and made it believe to worry it. Then Alice dodged behind a great thistle to keep herself from being run over. At the moment she appeared on the other side, the puppy made a rush to the stick and tumbled head over heels in a hurry to get a hold of it. Then Alice, thinking it was very like having a game to play with a cart horse, but expecting every moment to be trampled under its feet, ran around the thistle again. The puppy began a series of short charges at the stick, running a very little way forward each time, and long way back, barking hoarsely all the while, till at last it sat down a good way off, panting with its tongue out of its mouth and great eyes half shut. Well, imagine playing with a giant puppy. That'd be fun. This seemed to Alice a good opportunity for making her escape, so she set off at once till she was quite tired out of breath, until the puppy's bark sounded quite faint in the distance. And yet, what a dear little puppy it was, said Alice, as she let against the buttercup to rest herself, and fanned herself with one of the leaves. I should have liked teaching it tricks very much if it only been the right size to do it. Oh dear, I nearly have forgotten that I need to grow again. Let me see, how is it to be managed? I suppose I ought to eat and drink something or other, but the great question is, what? Where are you, Alice? The great question certainly was what. Alice looked all around at her, the flowers and the blades of grass, and she did not see anything that looked like the right thing to eat or drink under these circumstances. There was a large mushroom growing near her, at the same height as herself. When she looked around it and under it, on both sides of it, behind it, it occurred to her that she might as well see what was on the top of it. She stretched herself on tiptoe and peeped over the edge of the mushroom, and her eyes immediately met those of a large caterpillar that was sitting on the top with its arms folded, quietly smoking a long hookah, and taking not the smallest notice of her or anything else. That's the end of chapter 4. Yeah, it's time for the hookah with me. Let us take a moment to hydrate and breathe. Oh. Stretch. Breathe in from your nose and out from your mouth. And you stretch right, stretch left. Oh. Super comfy. I think I feel good from stretching. Stretching always feels nice as well. And breathe. So good. Yes, it's time for he, that very caterpillar himself, the caterpillar of hookah and confusion, taking those fat rips. Have you guys ever smoked hookah before? I'm not supposed to smoke nothing because I have lung problems, as you might know from my terrible breathing. One thing I'll have to say for sure is that I have smoked hookah and it is quite sweet. I love it. Go puff puff puff, but I shan't do it again. Is your spirit animal? Also, how dare my computer decide it's hot? I certainly have had hookah many years. Now let's see. Chapter 5. Advice from a Caterpillar. Meowdy, Junklabs. Meowdy. Advice from a Caterpillar. Gleam, I know you think that. Let's see. The caterpillar and Alice looked at each other for some time in silence. At last, the caterpillar took the hookah out of his mouth and addressed her languid and sleepy voice. Who are you? Said the caterpillar. This is not an encouraging opening of a conversation, Alice replied rather shyly. I hardly know, sir, just at present at least. I know who I was when I got up this morning, but I think I must have been changed several times since then. What do you mean by that? Said the caterpillar sternly. Explain yourself. I can't explain myself, I'm afraid, sir, said Alice. Because I am not myself, you see. I don't see, said the caterpillar. I'm afraid I can't put it more clearly, Alice replied very politely, for I can't understand it myself. I can't understand it to begin with, and being so many different sizes in a day is very confusing. It isn't, said the caterpillar. Well, perhaps you haven't found it so yet, said Alice, but when you have turned into a chrysalis, someday you'll know, and then after that into a butterfly. You should think you'll feel quite queer, won't you? Not a bit, said the caterpillar. Well, perhaps your feelings may be different, said Alice. All I know is I would feel very queer for sure. You'd be fine. You, said the caterpillar contemptuously. Who are you? Which brought them back to the beginning of the conversation. Alice felt a little bit irritated at the caterpillars making such a very short remarks and drew herself up again and said very gravely, "I think you ought to tell me who you are first." "Why?" said the caterpillar. Here was another puzzling question, and Alice could not think of any good reason the caterpillar. And the caterpillar seemed to be in a very unpleasant state of mind. She turned away. "Come back," said the caterpillar, calling after her. "I have something important to say." This sounded promising, certainly. Alice turned and came back again. "Keep your temper," said the caterpillar. "Is that all?" said Alice, swallowing down her anger as well as she could. "No," said the caterpillar. Alice thought it might as well wait, as she had nothing else to do, and perhaps for all it might be something to tell her worth hearing. For some minutes it puffed away without speaking, but at last it unfolded its arms and took the hookah out of its mouth again and said, "So you think you're changed, do you?" "I'm afraid I am, sir," said Alice. "I can't remember things I used to, and I don't keep the same size for more than 10 minutes together." "Can't remember what thing?" said the caterpillar. "Well, I've tried to say, 'How doth the little busy bee?' but it all came out different," Alice replied in a melancholy voice. "Well, I've tried to say," I repeated myself. "Repeat, your old Father William," said the caterpillar. Alice folded her hands and began. "Your old Father William," said the young man, "said, 'And your hair has become white, and yet you insistently stand on your head. Do you think at your age this is right?' 'In my youth,' Father William replied to his son, 'I feared it might injure the brain, but now I am perfectly sure I have none. Why, I do it again and again.' 'You are old,' said the youth, 'as I mentioned before. You have grown most uncomfortably fat. Yet you turned back somersault at the door. Pray, what is the reason of that?' 'In my youth,' sighed the sage and shook his green locks, 'I had kept all my limbs very supple. By the use of this ointment, 1 shilling the box. Allow me to sell you a couple.' 'You are old,' said the youth, 'and your jaws are so weak, for anything together is sweet. You finished the goose and the bones and the beak. Pray, how did you manage to do it?' 'In my youth,' said his father, 'I took to the law and argued each case with my wife, and the muscular strength which gave in my jaw has lasted me the rest of my life.' 'You are old,' said the youth. 'One would hardly suppose that your eye was steady as ever. You balanced an eel at the end of your nose. What made you so awfully clever?' 'I've answered 3 questions, and that is enough,' said his father. 'Don't give me your airs. Do you think I can listen to this stuff all day? Be off, or I'll kick you down the stairs.' 'That is not quite right. That is not said right,' said the caterpillar. 'Not quite right, I'm afraid,' said Alice timidly. 'Some of the words have gotten altered.' 'Ah, yes, Summer. I for sure will have it there, and thank you.' 'It's wrong from beginning to end,' said the caterpillar decidedly, and there was a silence for some minutes. The caterpillar was first to speak. 'What size do you want to be?' it said. 'Oh, I'm not particular as to size,' Alice said hastily, 'but only doesn't like changing size so often, you know.' 'I do not know,' said the caterpillar. Alice said nothing. She had never been so much contradicted in her life before. She felt like she was losing her temper. 'Are you content now?' said the caterpillar. 'Well, I should like to be a little larger, sir, if you wouldn't mind,' said Alice. 3 inches is a wretched height to be.' 'It is a very good height indeed,' said the caterpillar, angrily rearing itself upright as he spoke. He was exactly 3 inches tall. 'But I'm not used to it,' pleaded poor Alice, in a piteous tone, and she thought to herself, 'I wish the creatures wouldn't be so easily offended.' 'You'll get used to it in time,' said the caterpillar, and it put the hookah back into its mouth and began to smoke again. This time Alice waited patiently until it chose to speak again. In a minute or two, the caterpillar took its suka out of its mouth and yawned once or twice and shook itself, then got down off the mushroom and crawled away in the grass, merely remarking as it went, "One side will make you grow taller, and the other will make you grow shorter." One side of what? The other side of what? Thought Alice to herself. Of the mushroom, said the caterpillar, just as he had asked it aloud. In another moment it was out of sight. Alice remained looking thoughtfully at the mushroom for a minute, trying to make out which were the two sides of it. As it was perfectly round, she found a very difficult question. However, at last she stretched out her arms as far as they could go and broke off a bit of the edge on each hand. Which is which, she thought to herself as she nibbled a little bit to the right hand in a trying effort. The next moment she felt a violent blow underneath her chin as it struck her foot. She was a good deal frightened by this sudden change, but she thought there was no more time to be lost. As she was shrinking rapidly, she set to work at once more to eat the other bit. Her chin pressed closely against her foot, and there was hardly room to open her mouth, but she did it at last. She managed to swallow a morsel in the left hand a bit. "Come, my head's free at last," said Alice in a tone of delight, which had changed a little into alarm of another moment. But she found that her shoulders were nowhere to be found at all. All she could see when she looked down was an immense length of neck which seemed to rise and stalk out of the sea of green leaves that lay far below her. "What can all that green stuff be?" said Alice. "And where have my shoulders gone to? And oh, my poor hands, how is it that I can't see you?" She was moving them about as she spoke, but no result seemed to follow except a little shaking amongst the distant leaves. As there seemed to be no chance of getting her hands on her head, she tried to get her head into them. It was elated to find that her neck would bend about easily in any direction. Like a serpent, she had been succeeded to curving it down a gracefully zigzag and going to dive amongst the leaves, in which she found nothing but the tops of the trees under which she was been wandering, when a sharp hiss made her draw back in a hurry. A large pigeon had flown into her face and was beating her violently with its wings. "Serpent!" screamed the pigeon. "I am not a serpent," Alice indignantly said. "Leave me alone." "Serpent, I say again," repeated the pigeon, but more subdued a tone, and added a kind of sob. "I've tried every way, but nothing seems to suit them." "I haven't had the least idea of what you're talking about," said Alice. "I've tried these roots of trees, I've tried banks, I've tried hedges," the pigeon went on, without attending to her. "But those serpents, there's no pleasing them." Meowdy, Sir Mars. Alice was more puzzled and puzzled, as she thought there was no use saying anything more until the pigeon had finished. As if the trouble hadn't been enough hatching these eggs," said the pigeon, "but I must be on the lookout for serpents night and day. Why have I had a wink of sleep these past 3 weeks?" "I'm very sorry you've been annoyed," said Alice, who was beginning to see its meaning. "I've just been taken to the highest tree in the woods," continued the pigeon, raising its voice to a shriek. "And I was just thinking I should be free of them at last. They must need some wriggling down from the sky. Ugh, serpents!" "But I'm not a serpent, I tell you," said Alice. I'm a, well, what are you?" said the pigeon. I could see her trying to invent something. "I'm a little girl," said Alice, rather doubtfully, as she remembered the number of changes she had gone through that day. "A likely story indeed," the pigeon said in a tone in the deepest contempt. "I've seen many little girls in my time, but never one with such a neck as that." No, you're a serpent, there's no denying it. I suppose you'll be telling me next that you've never tasted an egg." I have tasted eggs, certainly, said Alice, who was a very truthful child. But little girls eat eggs quite as much as serpents do, you know. I do not believe it, said the pigeon. But if they do, then they're quite of a serpent in their own right. That's all I can say. This was a new idea to Alice, as she's quite silent for a minute or two and gave the pigeon an opportunity of adding. You're looking for eggs, I know that well enough. What does it matter to me whether you're a girl or a serpent? It matters a good deal to me, said Alice hastily, but I'm not looking for eggs as it happens. If I was, I shouldn't want yours. I don't like them raw. Well, be off then, said the pigeon in a sulky tone. As it settled down into its nest, Alice crouched among the trees, and as well as she could, her neck kept getting entangled amongst the branches, and every now and then she had to stop and untwist it. After a while, she remembered that she still had the piece of the mushroom in her hands. She set to work on carefully nibbling the first one and the other, growing sometimes smaller and sometimes shorter. Sometimes she succeeded in bringing herself down to her usual height. It was long since she had been anything near the right size that it felt quite strange at first. She got used to it in a few minutes and began talking to herself as usual. Come, there's half of my plan done. How puzzling all these changes are. I'm never sure where I'm gonna be from one minute to another. However, I've gotten to my right size. The next thing is to get to that beautiful garden. How is this supposed to be done, I wonder? As she said this, she came suddenly to an open place with a little house and about 4 feet high. Whoever lives here, thought Alice, it'll never do to come upon it this size. I should frighten them out of their wits. But she began nibbling right-handed again and did not venture to go near the house till she brought herself to 9 inches tall. And that's the end of that chapter. We finished chapter 5. Time to sit by. It's very good. Wow, we've been reading for almost 2 hours. Your puppy fell asleep. That's so cute, so cute, so cute. Let's read one more chapter, okay? We'll have one more chapter for this day. Chapter 6. Pig and Pepper. First, let's breathe. Chapter 6. Pig and Pepper. For a minute or two she stood looking at the house and wondering what to do next, when suddenly a footman in a livery came running out of the wood. She considered him to be a footman because he was in livery, otherwise, judging by his face only, you would have called him a fish. He rapped loudly at the door with his knuckles. It was opened by another footman in livery, with the same round face and large eyes like a frog, and both footmen, Alice noticed, had powdered hair and curled over their heads. She felt very curious to know what this was all about, and crept a little way out of the woods to listen. The fish footman began by producing under his arm a great letter, nearly as large as himself. He handed it over to the other, saying in a solemn tone, "For the Duchess, an invitation from the Queen to play croquet." The frog footman repeated the solemn tone, only changing the order of the words a little. "From the Queen, an invitation to the Duchess to play croquet." They both bowed and their curls got entangled together. Alice laughed so much that she had to run back into the woods in fear of them hearing her. And when she peeped out, the fish and footman was gone, and they was sitting on the ground near the door, staring stupidly up into the sky. Alice went timidly to the door and knocked. There was no use of knocking, said the footman, and that's for 2 reasons. First, because I'm on the same side of the door as you. Secondly, because I'm making a noise inside no one could possibly hear you. There's almost an extraordinary noise going on within. Constant howling and sneezing every now and then. A great crash of a dish kettle had been broken to pieces. Please then, said Alice, how am I going to get in? There might be some sense in your knocking, the footman went on, without attending to her. If we had a door between us, for instance, if you were inside, you might knock and I can let you out if you know. He was looking up at the sky at the time he was speaking and missed Alice, though decidedly uncivil. Perhaps he can't help it, she said to herself. His eyes are very nearly at the top of his head, and at any rate he might answer the question. How am I to get in? She repeated herself aloud. I shall stay here, said the footman, till tomorrow. At this moment the door of the house opened and a large plate came skimming out. Straight at the footman's head, it just grazed his nose and broke into pieces against the tree behind him. Or the next day, maybe, said the footman, continuing the same tone exactly as nothing had happened. How am I going to get in? Alice said again in a louder tone. Are you going to get in at all? Said the footman. That's the first question, you know. It was no doubt, only Alice did not like to be told so. It's really dreadful, she muttered to herself. The way that creatures argue is enough to drive one crazy. The footman seemed to think a good opportunity for repeating his remarks with variation. I shall sit here, he said, on and off for days and days. But what am I to do, Alice? Said Alice. Anything you like, said the footman, and began whistling. Oh, there's no use to talking, said Alice desperately. He's perfectly idiotic. And she opened the door and went in. The door led right into a large kitchen, which was full of smoke from one end to another. The Duchess was sitting on a 3-legged stool in the middle of the nursing a baby. The cook was leaning over the fire, stirring a large cauldron which seemed to be full of soup. There was certainly too much pepper in that soup, Alice said to herself, as well as she could for sneezing and sneezing. There was certainly too much of it for it to be in the air. Even the Duchess sneezed occasionally, and as the baby, it was sneezing and howling alternately without a moment's pause. The only thing in the kitchen that did not sneeze was the cook, a large cat which was sitting on the hearth grinning from ear to ear. Please, would you tell me, said Alice timidly, as she was not quite sure whether the manners of her to speak first. Why your cat grins like that? It's a Cheshire cat, said the Duchess. And that's why, pig. She said the last word with sudden violence that Alice quite jumped. She saw a moment in that dress to the baby and did not know her, and she took courage and went in again. I did not know that Cheshire cats always grinned. In fact, I did not know cats could grin. They all can, said the Duchess, and most of them do. I don't know any of that, too, Alice said very politely, feeling quite pleased to have gotten into